And as Adam noted, Jill Stein is not the only Massachusetts pol who is part of a third-party ticket. Former Republican Governor Bill Weld is now running for vice president on the Libertarian ticket. And I guess Philadelphia is the place to be regardless of your party affiliation, because that's where we find Bill Weld tonight. Governor, good to see you. I assume you're there because I know you to be a guy who just can't resist a good party.
No, it's more to help mark the occasion for my old friend Hillary and her historic achievement.
You know, Governor, speaking of your old friend Hillary, when you were kind enough to join me on the show in February, you said it was, quote, possible you could support Donald Trump, and you mentioned your old friend Hillary, and you served on the Watergate committee with her. You implied that you might be able to support her, too. What happened in those intervening months?
You know, things have changed a little bit. Gary Johnson called me up and asked me if I wanted to go on the Libertarian ticket with him. He's an old friend from when we served as governors together, and we're both fiscal conservatives. We're both socially inclusive and tolerant, so it seemed like a good idea to me. In the last few weeks, we've been kind of making some progress, and I think that we're likely now to be included in the presidential and vice presidential debates in November, and that makes us a dangerous commodity. So when people talk to me now about why should I waste a vote, I'm saying you shouldn't. You should vote for who you agree with, and that's us, and don't waste a vote on Trump or Clinton. I say that with deference, not throwing stones at anybody. So, just our political take.
You know, Governor, for most of us, libertarian means smaller government, more personal freedom, that kind of. Is that a fair bumper sticker for what libertarians stand for?
Yeah, as I said in Houston at the Republican convention in 1992, I want the government out of your pocketbook and out of your bedroom.
So let's apply that philosophy to a couple things that are obviously center stage in this campaign. Both Trump and Clinton, at least now, oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Where are you guys on a trade issue like that?
We're strongly in favor of free trade and the TPP. We think it's madness at the 11th hour to turn against it. It gives us a trading platform, free trade with 11 Asian nations, not including China. So it's like more than a beachhead economically in Asia. It's a wonderful platform for us in Asia, and it does the work of years of cultural diplomacy. It's a masterstroke. The North American Free Trade Agreement, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I heard that Mrs. Clinton is going the other way on that one. I remember being in the Clinton White House with President Bill Clinton, Speaker Gingrich, myself, and Bill Daley from Chicago, who is the chief head counter for the votes on that, rustling up the votes to get it passed the next day. Bill Clinton was absolutely instrumental. He was the key guy on that. He got it done with more Republican votes than Democratic, and I would hope that the Republicans in Congress, who are not necessarily bound by what Mr. Trump says on let's have a closed economy, I would hope that they would continue their tradition of free trade.
The place where the candidates differ is on raising the minimum wage on the federal level. Donald Trump lately has been saying leave it to the states. Hillary Clinton, as you know, has bought into the Bernie Sanders. $15 should be the national threshold. Where are you guys on this?
You know, I'm sympathetic, but I think beyond a certain point, there's no such thing as government money. There's only taxpayers' money. We can't say all these things are going to be free. As you know, Jim, because you and I worked on it in the 1990s, and Charlie Baker just did it in Massachusetts, I'm in favor of steeply increasing the earned income tax credit as a way of putting more money in the pockets of the working poor, if you will, the poor guy with a wife and 2 kids who's making $32,500 a year. There is also a gap, and we have to be honest and say if we're going to have globalization and free trade, you know, we're going to have some pain domestically, and I'm not one who thinks the government should stand back and do nothing when that happens. I think we can be aggressive about resettlement and retraining policies. I don't want this to be a world like the world of my father, where if you were 50 years old and you lost your job, you were just plumb out of luck. Nobody was going to hire you. So I think with an older workforce and with a workforce with dislocations, we have to do everything we can to be proactive to make sure that those dislocations are addressed. That's the answer to the pain felt by, if you will, the Trump voters who feel that things have been taken from them and they don't really understand it. We can't have a laissez-faire attitude in the face of that suffering.
Governor, speaking of a different world from your father's, the world of terrorism, ISIS, Donald Trump, I'm not quite clear, but is going to wipe him out and quickly, whatever that means. Hillary Clinton supports an intelligence surge. Quickly, if you can, what's the Johnson-Weld approach to international terror at ISIS?
Well, it's not the same as Donald Trump's. He's going to say no Muslim should come to this country. He perhaps doesn't realize that most of the fighting against ISIS is done by majority Muslim countries.
So what is it?
I do agree with I agree with President Obama that Donald Trump is doing a lot of recruiting work for ISIS. Domestically, for the lone wolves, I've called for a task force, 1,000 FBI agents with a like number of prosecutors to sift evidence to make sure we don't have a repeat of the Omar Mateen situation where he was interviewed twice as a suspicious person by the FBI and then dropped off the list. Internationally, it's tougher. I think Gary Johnson and I are not quite so interventionist, so regime change oriented as perhaps Mrs. Clinton is, and where American blood on foreign soil is concerned, or American boots on the ground, you're really going to have to show us there's a strong national interest. Having said that, I think we have to, the ticket thinks we need to have an invincible defense and demonstrated military superiority, in fact supremacy, in both air and naval power. That's the best shield we have, and then have a smaller but mobile expeditionary force that could respond as needed to crises around the world, but not in the absence of a crisis.
Governor, last thing, you mentioned the debates. Obviously, you need to reach that 15% threshold to be there. I would argue, and I assume you'd agree, that's critical to any success for your campaign. So you have to increase your support roughly 50%. So you have to convince a lot of people who know virtually nothing about you to support you. A guy who knows everything about you, and I would argue even loves you, your protege, Charlie Baker, says he's not voting for you. What message does that send to people you're trying to bring into the Johnson-Weld camp?
I think it's very smart of Governor Baker to stay out of the national race here 100%. As soon as he sticks his big toe in, everyone's going to drag him down the corridor to Washington and say, well, now tell us, what do you think about this issue in the presidential race this year? I think, we're at 12 and 13% in the latest national polls, so we only have to raise it a couple more percentage points. I think we'll get there because I've sensed, both on the fundraising front and the media front, an increasing realization that we do represent a third way right between the two parties. Neither party speaks for us, and they have a two-party monopoly, which I think has outlived its usefulness. They seem to exist only for the purpose of sticking their finger in the eye of the other party. We like to think that we've got a four-lane highway going between the two parties. Gary Johnson, I think, is going to take the state of Utah based on today's pollings, where he's within 3 and 4 points of Trump and Clinton. So we'll be influencing the Electoral College, and I think we've got a potentially winning message in fiscal responsibility and social tolerance and inclusion. And put us in the debates, and I think we pose a threat to the existing hegemony of those two parties, who are there really without much more reason than just because they're there.
Governor, I didn't expect to see you there, but I'm really happy that I did. Governor Weld, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.